Hello, everybody. Uh, uh, Welcome to our third session in our reading of the Intro to Philosophy, uh, Sophie's World. We have already completed two readings and have been very quickly and rapidly introduced to highly interesting Western philosophical evolution and frameworks. So, our protagonist or the chief character in the novel or the book, Sophie, is in the middle of some very interesting discovery. So, with that said, we have been joined by SK Garu as well as Sikshardin Garu in the panel. Welcome to both of you.
Hello.
So, hello, hello
Thank
SK
you,
Garu,
sir.
hello Sikshardin Garu.
Hello to everybody, sir.
Yeah, hello to everybody, all the viewers. So, I'm going to post a link. You can come in, but the initial portion of it is going to be focused on the reading. We can always have an off-site discussion. The question is interesting, but nevertheless, we'll try to cover the concepts and then we can always have a fairly detailed discussion later, depending on where it goes. So here I have posted the link. So with that said, we'll give the first part of the reading today to SK Garu. And today we're going to start with, I'll complete the last sentence that we read in the last session was a very interesting one. So after all the things that have been introduced to Sophie, she came to some kind of a conclusion. What did she conclude? She said she decided that philosophy was not something that you can learn, but perhaps you can learn to think philosophically. Okay? So that was her conclusion. And then the promise was that we're going to talk about this another wonderful philosopher called Democritus. So SK Garu, over to you, and you can.
Okay, so I will need help with pronunciation, so keep an eye on it.
Don't worry about it. Only proper nouns and proper nouns. There is no such thing as a proper pronunciation. It depends on locally how they are pronounced. So yeah, I'll watch. Please
So
go
it
ahead.
is Hilda.
Hilda is the correct
Hilda.
pronunciation.
Okay. So, Democritus, the most ingenious toy in the world. Sophie put all the typed pages from the unknown philosopher back into the cookie tin and put the lid on it. She crawled out of the den and stood for a while looking across the garden. She thought about what happened yesterday. Her mother had teased her about the love letter again at breakfast this morning. She walked quickly over to the mailbox to prevent the same thing from happening today. Getting a love letter 2 days in a row would be doubly embarrassing. There was another little white envelope. Sophie began to discern a pattern in the deliveries. Every afternoon, she would find a big brown envelope. While she read the contents, the philosopher would sneak up to the mailbox with while she's reading the letter, the philosopher would sneak up to the mailbox with another little white envelope. So now Sophie would be able to find out who he was, if it was he. She had a good view of the mailbox from her room. If she stood at the window, she would see the mysterious philosopher. White envelopes don't just appear out of thin air. Sophie decided to keep a careful watch the following day. Tomorrow was Friday, and she would have the whole weekend ahead of her. She went up to her room and opened the envelope. There was only one question today, but it was even dumber than the previous three. So the question is this: why is Lego the most ingenious toy in the world? So that's the only question in the letter today. Okay. For a start, Sophie was not at all sure she agreed that it was. It was years since she had played with the little plastic blocks. Moreover, she couldn't, for the life of her, see what Lego could possibly have to do with philosophy. But she was dutiful student. Uh, rummaging, rummaging on the top shelf of her closet, she found a bag full of Lego blocks of all shapes and sizes. For the first time in ages, she began to build with them. As she worked, some ideas began to occur to her about the blocks. They're easy to assemble, she thought. Even though they're all different, they all fit together. They're also unbreakable. She couldn't ever remember having seen a broken Lego block. All her blocks looked as bright and new as the day they were bought many years ago. The best thing about them was that with Lego, she could construct any kind of object. And then she could separate the blocks and construct something new. What more could one ask of a toy? Sophie decided that Lego really could be called the most ingenious toy in the world. But what it had to do with philosophy was beyond her. She had nearly finished constructing a big doll's house. Much as she hated to admit it, she hadn't had as much fun in ages. Why did people quit playing when they grew up? When her mother got home and saw what Sophie had been doing, she blurted out, "What fun! I'm so glad you're not too grown up to play." That's what mom said. Okay, she's replying, "I'm not playing." Sophie retorted indignantly. "I'm doing a very complicated philosophical experiment," she says. Her mother sighed deeply. She was probably thinking about the white rabbit and the top hat. When Sophie got home from school the following day, there were several more pages for her in a big brown envelope. She took them upstairs to her room. She could not wait to read them, but she had to keep her eye on the mailbox at the same time. So, letter. The atom theory. Here am I here am I again, Sophie. Today you're going to hear about the last of the great natural philosophers. His name is Democritus. 460 to 370 before Common Era. Okay. And he was from the little town of Abdera on the northern Aegean coast. Okay. If you were able to answer the question about Lego blocks without difficulty, you should have no problem understanding what this philosopher's project was. Democritus agreed with his predecessors that transformations in nature could not be due to the fact that anything actually changed. He therefore assumed that everything was built up of tiny invisible blocks, each of which was eternal and immutable. Democritus called these smallest units atoms. The word atom, means uncuttable. For Democritus, it was all important to establish that the constituent parts that everything else was composed of could not be divided indefinitely into smaller parts. If this were possible, they could not be used as blocks. If atoms could eternally be broken down into even smaller parts, nature would begin to dissolve like constantly diluted soup. Moreover, nature's blocks had to be eternal because nothing can come from nothing. In this, he agreed with Parmenides and Eli- Elliptics. Okay, will other philosophers Ankunta. Okay. Also, he believed that all atoms were firm and solid, but they could not all be the same. If all atoms were identical, there would still be no satisfactory explanation of how they could combine to form everything from poppies and olive trees to goat skin and human hair. Democritus believed that nature consisted of an unlimited number and variety of atoms. Some were round and smooth, others were irregular and jagged. And precisely because they were so different, they could
Sorry,
join together.
sorry. Oscar, it is jagged.
Jagged.
Yeah,
Okay. Like rugged.
exactly.
Okay. Okay. And precisely because they were so different, be- because they were so different, they could join together into all kinds of different bodies. But however infinite they might be in number and shape, they were all eternal, immutable, and indivisible. When a body, a tree, or an animal, for instance, died and disintegrated, the atoms dispersed and could be used again in new bodies. Atoms moved around in space, but because they had hooks and barbs, they could join together to form all the things we see around us. So now you see what I meant about Lego blocks. They have more or less the same properties as those with Democritus ascribed to atoms. And that is what makes them so much fun to build with. They're first and foremost indivisible. Then they have different shapes and sizes. They are solid and impermeable. They also have hooks and barbs so that they can be connected to form every conceivable figure. These connections can later be broken again so that new figures can be constructed from the same blocks. The fact that they can be used over and over is what has made Lego so popular. Each single Lego block can be part of a truck one day and part of a castle the day after. We could also say that Lego blocks are eternal. Children of today can play with the same blocks their parents played with when they were little. We can form things out of clay too, but clay cannot be used over and over because it can be broken up into smaller and smaller pieces. These tiny pieces can never be joined together again to make something else. Today, we can establish that Democritus' atom theory was more or less correct. Nature really is built up of different atoms that join and separate again. A hydrogen atom in a cell at the end of my nose was once part of an elephant's trunk. A carbon atom in my cardiac muscle was once in the tail of dinosaur. In our own time, however, scientists have discovered that atoms can be broken into smaller elemental particles. We call these elemental particles protons, neutrons, and electrons. These will possibly someday be broken into even lesser particles. But physicists agree that somewhere along the line there has to be a limit. There has to be a minimal part of which nature consists. Democritus did not have access to modern electronic apparatus. His only proper equipment was his mind. But reason left him no real choice. Once it is accepted that nothing can change, that nothing can come out of nothing, and that nothing is ever lost, then nature must consist of infinitesimal, infinitesimal blocks that can join and separate again. Democritus did not believe in any force or soul that could intervene in natural processes. The only things that existed, he believed, were atoms and the void. Since he believed in nothing but material things, we call him materialist. According to Democritus, there is no conscious design in the movement of atoms. In nature, everything happens quite mechanically. This doesn't mean that everything happens randomly, for everything obeys the inevitable laws of necessity. Everything that happens has a natural cause, a cause that is inherent in the thing itself. Democritus once said that he would rather discover a new cause of nature than be the king of Persia. The atom theory also explains our sense, perception, thought, Democritus. When we sense something, it is due to the movement of atoms in space. When I see the moon, it is because moon atoms penetrate my eye. But what about the soul then? Surely that could not consist of atoms of material things. Indeed, it could. Democritus believed that the soul was made up of special round, smooth soul atoms. When a human being died, the soul atoms flew in all directions and could then become part of a new soul formation. This meant that human beings had no immortal soul, another belief that many people share today. They believe, like Democritus, that soul is connected with brain and that we cannot have any form of consciousness once the brain disintegrates. Democritus' atom theory marked the end of Greek natural philosophy for the time being. He agreed with Heraclitus, okay, that everything in nature flowed since storms come and go. But behind everything that flowed, there were some eternal and immutable things that did not flow. Democritus called them atoms. Okay, so that's what the letter said. Okay. During her reading, Sophie glanced out of the window several times to see whether her mysterious correspondent had turned up at the mailbox. Now she just sat staring down the road, thinking about what she had read. She felt that Democritus' ideas had been so simple and yet so ingenious. He had discovered the real solution to the problem of basic substance and transformation. This problem had been so complicated that philosophers had gone around puzzling over it for generations. And in the end, Democritus had solved it on his own by using his common sense. Sophie could hardly help smiling. It had to be true that nature was built up of small parts that never changed. At the, at the same time, Heraclitus was obviously right in thinking that all forms in nature flow. Because everybody dies, animals die, even a mountain range slowly disintegrates. The point was that the mountain range is made up of tiny, indivisible parts that never break up. At the same time, Democritus had raised some new questions. For example, he had said that everything happened mechanically. He did not accept that there was any spiritual force in life, unlike Empedocles and Anaxagoras. Democritus also believed that man had no immortal soul. Could she be sure of that? She did not know. But then she had only just begun the philosophy course. Adi. That's with the Democritus.
Super.
Outstanding.
Wonderful. Hello, Davji.
Yeah. Hello, Daji. How are you?
How are you?
I am
Can you?
good. Little bit
Okay.
nosy here. So that's why I will not speak.
Yeah. No problem.
Yeah, all
But
right,
if you
no
have any
problem.
question or comment, please go ahead. It's okay. All right. So, Sikshar, then do you want to take the next chapter, or I can take it?
Yeah, yes, sir. The
Yeah,
next
please.
chapter says fate. So I think I like it, sir. So
Outstanding. Please go ahead.
I'll go on with the next chapter, sir. So the next chapter is fate. The fortune teller is trying to foresee something that is really unforeseeable. Sophie had been keeping her eye on the mailbox while she read about Democritus. But just in case, she decided nevertheless to take a stroll down to the garden gate. When she opened the front door, she saw a small envelope on the front step, and sure enough, it was addressed to Sophie Amundsen. So he had tricked her. Today, of all days, when she had kept such careful watch on the mailbox, the mystery man had sneaked up to the house from a different angle and just laid the letter on the step before making off into the woods again. That. How did he know that Sophie was watching the mailbox today? Had he seen her out at the window? Anyway, she was glad to find the letter before her mother arrived. Sophie went back to her room and opened the letter. The white envelope was a bit wet around the edges and had two little holes in it. Why was that? It had not rained for several days. The little note inside read, "Do you believe in fate? Is sickness the punishment of the gods? What forces govern the course of history?" The first question. Did she believe in fate? She was not all sure, but she knew a lot of people who did. There was a girl in her class who read horoscopes in magazines. But if they believed in astrology, they probably believed in fate as well, because astrologers claimed that the position of the stars influenced people's lives on Earth. If you believed that a black cat crossing your path meant bad luck, well, then you believed in fate, didn't you? As she thought about it, several more examples of fatalism occurred to her. Why do so many people knock on wood first, for example? And why was Friday the 13th an unlucky day? Sophie had heard that lots of hotels had no room number 13. It had to be because so many people were superstitious. Superstitious, what a strange word. If you believed in Christianity or Islam, it was called faith. But if you believed in astrology or Friday the 13th, it was superstition. Who had the right to call other people's beliefs superstition? Sophie was sure of one thing, though. Democritus had not believed in fate. He was a materialist. He had only believed in atoms and empty space. Sophie tried to think about the other questions on the note. Is sickness the punishment of gods? Surely nobody believed that nowadays. But it occurred to her that many people thought it helped to pray for recovery. So, at any rate, they must believe that God had some power over people's health. The last question was harder to answer. Sophie had never given much thought to what governed the course of history. It had to be people. Surely, if it was God or fate, people had no free will. The idea of free will made Sophie think of something else. Why should she put up with why should she put up with this mysterious philosopher playing cat and mouse with her? Why couldn't she write a letter? He or she would quite probably put another big envelope in the mailbox during the night or sometime tomorrow morning. She would see to it that there was a letter ready for this person. Sophie began right away. It was difficult to write to someone she had never seen. She didn't even know if it was a man or a woman, or if he or she was old or young. For that matter, the mysterious philosopher could even be someone she already knew. She wrote, "Most respected philosopher, your generous correspondence course in the philosophy is greatly appreciated by us here. But it bothers us not to know who you are. We therefore request you to use your full name. In return, we would like to extend our hospitality should you care to come and have should you care to come and have coffee with us. But preferably when my mother is at home. She is at work from 7:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. every day, from Monday to Friday. I am at school during these days, but I am always home by 2:15 p.m. except on Thursdays. I am also very good at making coffee. Thanking you in advance, I remain your attentive student, Sophie Amundsen, aged 14. At the bottom of the page, she wrote RSVP. Sophie felt that the letter had turned out much too formal, but it was hard to know which words to choose when writing to a person without a face. She put the letter in a pink envelope and addressed it to the philosopher. The problem was where to put it, so her mother didn't find it. She would have to wait for her to get home before putting it in the mailbox. And she would also have to remember to look in the mailbox early the next morning before the newspaper arrived. If no new letter came for her this evening or during the night, she would have to take the pink envelope in again. Why did it all have to be so complicated? That evening, Sophie went up to her room early, even though it was a Friday. Her mother tried to tempt her with pizza and a thriller on TV, but Sophie said she was tired and wanted to go to bed and read. While her mother sat watching TV, she sneaked out to the mailbox with her letter. Her mother was her mother was clearly worried. She had started speaking to Sophie in a different tone since the business with the white rabbit and the top hat. Sophie hated to be a worry to her mother, but she just had to go upstairs and keep an eye on the mailbox. When her mother came up at about 11 o'clock, Sophie was sitting at the window staring down the road. "You're not still sitting there staring at the mailbox," she said. I can look I can look at whatever I like. I really think you must be in love, Sophie. But if he is going to bring you another letter, he certainly won't come in the middle of the night. Yuck! Sophie loathed all that soppy talk about love, but she had to let her mother go on believing it was true. Is he the one who told you about the rabbit and the top hat? Her mother asked. Sophie nodded. He he doesn't do drugs, does he? Now Sophie felt really sorry for her mother. She couldn't go on letting her worry this way, although it was completely nutty of her to think that just because someone had a slightly bizarre idea, he must be on something. Grown-ups really were idiotic sometimes. She said, Mom, I promise you, once and for all, I'll never do any of that stuff. And he doesn't either, but he is very interested in philosophy. Is he older than you? Sophie shook her head. The same age? Sophie nodded. Well, I'm sure he's very sweet, darling. Now I think you should try and get some sleep. But Sophie stayed, sitting by the window for what seemed like hours. At last, she could hardly keep her eyes open. It was 1 o'clock. She was just about to go to bed when she suddenly caught sight of a shadow emerging from the woods. Although it was almost dark outside, she could make out of she could make out the shape of a human figure. It was a man, and Sophie thought he looked quite old. He was certainly not her. He was wearing a beret of some kind. She could have sworn he glanced up at the house, but Sophie's light was not on. The man went straight up to the mailbox and dropped a big envelope into it. And as he let go of it, he caught sight of Sophie's letter. He reached down into the mailbox and fished it up. The next minute he was walking swiftly back toward the woods. He hurried down the woodland path and was gone. Sophie felt her heart pounding. Her first instinct was to run after him in her pajamas, but she didn't dare run after a stranger in the middle of the night. But she did have to go out and fetch the envelope. After a minute or two, she crept down the stairs, opened the front door quietly, and ran to the mailbox. In a flash, she was back in her room with the envelope in her hand. She sat on her bed, holding her breath. After a few minutes had passed and all was still quiet in the house, she opened the letter and began to read. She knew this would not be an answer to her own letter that could not arrive until tomorrow. Fate. Good morning once again, my dear Sophie. In case you should get any ideas, let me make it quite clear that you must never attempt to check upon me. One day we will meet, but I shall be the one to decide when and where, and that's final. You are not going to disobey me, are you? But to return to philosophers, we have seen how they tried to find natural explanations from the transformations in nature. Previously, these things had been explained through myths. Old traditions, old superstitions had to be cleared away in other areas as well. We see them at work in matters of sickness and health as well as in political events. In both these areas, the Greeks were great believers in fatalism. Fatalism is the belief that whatever happens is predestined. We find this belief all over the world, not only throughout history, but in our own day as well. Here, in the Nordic countries, we find a strong belief in Lagnadan, or fate in the old Icelandic sagas of the Edda. We also find the belief, both in ancient Greece and in other parts of the world, that people could learn their fate from some form of oracle. In other words, that the fate of a person or a country could be foreseen in various ways. There are still a lot of people who believe that they can tell your fortune in cards, read your palm, or predict your future in the stars. A special Norwegian version of this is telling your fortune in coffee cups. When a coffee cup is empty, there are usually some traces of coffee grounds left. These might form a certain image or pattern, if we give our at least if we give our imagination free rein. If the grounds resemble a car, it might mean that the person who drank from the cup is going for a long drive. Thus, the fortune teller is trying to foresee something that is really quite unforeseeable. This is characteristic of all forms of foreseeing, and precisely because what they see is so vague, it is hard to repudiate fortune tellers' claims. When we gaze up at the stars, we see a veritable chaos of twinkling dots. Nevertheless, throughout the ages, there have always been people who believed that the stars could tell us something about our life on earth. Even today, there are political leaders who seek the advice of astrologers before they make any important decisions. So, shall I continue, sir?
Yeah, please go ahead. Unless SK Garu wants to take over and you can come back with the
Okay, sir.
section.
All right.
Yeah, I
So,
don't know. Is SK Garu, you're okay with Siksha Garu taking the next one as well?
Yeah, go ahead, Siksha.
Yeah,
okay, sir.
thank you. Thanks, Siksha Garu.
So, the next chapter's name is the Oracle at Delphi. The ancient Greeks believed that they could consult the famous oracle at Delphi about their fate. Apollo, the god of the oracle, spoke through his priestess Pythia, who sat on a stool over a fissure in the earth, from which arose hypnotic vapors that put Pythia in a trance. This enabled her to be Apollo's mouthpiece. When people came to Delphi, they had to present their question to the priests of the oracle, who passed it on to Pythia. Her answer would be so obscure or ambiguous that the priests would have to interpret it. In that way, the people got the benefit of Apollo's wisdom, believing that she knew everything, even about the future. There were many heads of state who dared not go to war or take other decisive steps until they had consulted the oracle at Delphi. The priests of Apollo, excuse me, the priests of Apollo thus functioned more or less as diplomats or advisors. They were experts with an intimate knowledge of the people and the country. Over the entrance to the temple at Delphi, was a famous inscription, "Know thyself." It reminded visitors that man must never believe himself to be more than mortal, and that no man can escape his destiny. The Greeks had many stories of people whose destiny catches up with them. As time went by, a number of plays, tragedies were written about the tragic people. The most famous one is the tragedy of King Oedipus. So, before going to the chapter of history and medicine, hello, Shravan sir. How are you? Shravan sir, are you there, sir?
Hi, Shiksha. Yeah, I'm there. Adhe Chinna,
Yes,
there
sir.
was a small correction. It is not oracle, it's oracle. Not
All
oracle,
right.
it's oracle. Small
Oracle.
difference.
Right, sir.
Yeah. So
That's what,
we
how it is
told
pronounced, it seems.
we made an announcement that proper nouns can be pronounced anyway. We don't want to
Yeah.
pronounce.
Moreover, we are in India, we're Indians, so we can pronounce
No,
anything
sir.
anyway we want. Nobody can say anything about it.
No, sir. It is always good to know. Uh, thank you, sir.
So we are not born to an Englishman, so it doesn't matter. We don't have to care what other people think. We will pronounce the way we will do it.
Right, sir. Right, sir. So the next chapter is history and medicine. Sir, shall we go into it, sir?
Yeah, please go ahead, sir. I think the next real chapter
Right.
is Socrates. So these are all sort of
Oh,
sections of the
wonderful.
yeah.
Okay. Hello, Tiger, sir. Black Tiger.
Hello, Tiger. How are you?
Hello.
Howdy.
Howdy. How are you
Howdy.
all?
All right. How are you?
Fine, sir.
Doing good.
Yeah, man. High five.
Yeah.
ఎక్కువ
మరి
అయిపోయింది కదా
లాంగ్వేజ్ ఉంది సార్ లాంగ్వేజ్
అదే అదే
Tiger, sir, have you had your English breakfast today?
Yeah, it's not the English breakfast. It's a kind of yep.
English version of idli dosa.
Exactly.
From Sambarland. Okay.
Let's go back to
Yeah.
reading.
The,
Tragedy of King Oedipus. Do you
Yeah,
know about
exactly.
the tragedy?
Yeah,
no,
yeah.
maybe
Oedipus
we are about to.
Oedipus complex is very popular in the
Sir,
psychological,
is it
clinical
sir? Is it
psychology.
Oedipus? Sir, is it
Yeah,
Oedipus
Oedipus
or
is the
Oedipus?
Oedipus. I don't know. Depends on the country, I guess. Here it's called Oedipus. There is Oedipus.
No,
There
it's
is only I
because
don't
it's
know.
a famous story about it, like about him,
Correct. Yeah,
King Oedipus.
exactly.
Okay.
Siksharthan, you
So
know? Not.
no, I don't know. Maybe we'll know in the next chapter.
It was. No. Okay, read after that. We will talk about it.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
can discuss
Yes.
once we finish the reading. Yeah.
Yes, sir. So the next chapter is history and medicine, as it goes. But fate did not just govern the lives of individuals. The Greeks believed that even world history was governed by fate, and that the fortunes of war could be swayed by the intervention of the gods. Today, there are still many people who believe that God or some other mysterious power is steering the course of history. But at the same time, as Greek philosophers were trying to find natural explanations for the processes of nature, the first historians were beginning to search for natural explanations for the course of history. When a country lost a war, the vengeance of the gods was no longer an acceptable explanation to them. The best known Greek historians were Herodotus and Thucydides. Pardon for my pronunciation. The Greeks also believed that sickness could be ascribed to divine intervention. On the other hand, the gods could make people well again if they made the appropriate sacrifices. This idea was in no way unique to the Greeks. Before the development of modern medicine, the most widely accepted view was that sickness was due to supernatural causes. The word influenza actually means a malign influence from the stars. Even today, there are a lot of people who believe that some diseases, AIDS for example, are God's punishment. Many also believe that sick people can be cured with the help of the supernatural. Concurrently with the new directions in Greek philosophy, a Greek medical science arose which tried to find natural explanations for sickness and health. The founder of Greek medicine is said to have been Hippocrates, who was born on the island of Kos around 460 BCE. The most essential safeguards against sickness, according to the Hippocratic medical tradition, were moderation and a healthy lifestyle. Health is the natural condition, where when sickness occurs, it is a sign that nature has gone off course because of physical or mental imbalance. The road to health for everyone is through moderation, harmony, and a sound mind in a sound body. There is a lot of talk today about medical ethics, which is another way of saying that a doctor must practice medicine according to certain ethical rules. For instance, a doctor may not give healthy people a prescription for narcotics. A doctor must also maintain professional secrecy, which means that he is not allowed to reveal anything a patient has told him about his illness. These ideas go back to Hippocrates. He required his pupils to take the following oath: I will follow that system or regimen which, according to my ability and judgment, I consider to be for the benefit of my patients, and abstain from whatever is deleterious and mischievous. I will give no deadly medicine to anyone if asked if asked, nor suggest any such counsel. And in like manner, I will not give to a woman the means to produce an abortion. Whenever I go into a house, I will go for the benefit of the sick, and will abstain from every voluntary act of mischief and corruption, and further from the seduction of females or males, whether freemen or slaves. Whatever in connection with my professional practice I see or hear which ought not to be spoken abroad, I will keep secret. So long as I continue to carry out this oath unviolated, may it be granted to me to enjoy life and the practice of the art, respected by all men in all times. But should I violate this oath, may the reverse be my lot. Sophie awoke with a start on Saturday morning. Was it a dream, or had she really seen the philosopher? She felt under the bed with one hand. Yes, there lay the letter that had come during the night. It wasn't only a dream. She had definitely seen the philosopher. And what's more, with her own eyes, she had seen him take her letter. She crouched down on the floor and pulled out all the typewritten pages from under the bed. But what was that? Right by the wall there was something red. A scarf, perhaps? Sophie edged herself in under the bed and pulled out a red silk scarf. It wasn't hers, that was for sure. She examined it more closely and gasped when she saw Hilda, Hilde, written in ink along the seam. Hilda, but who was Hilda? How could their paths keep crossing like this? So there ends this chapter of fate. Now begins Socrates. Socrates, wisest is she who knows she does not know. Sophie put on a summer dress and hurried down to the kitchen. Her mother was standing by the kitchen table. Sophie decided not to say anything about the silk scarf. Did you bring in the newspaper? She asked. Her mother turned. Would you get it for me? Sophie was out of the door in a flash, down the gravel path to the mailbox. Only the newspaper. She couldn't expect an answer so soon, she supposed. On the front page of the paper, she read something. She read something about the Norwegian UN battalion in Lebanon. The UN battalion. Wasn't that the postmark on the card from Hilda's father? But the postage stamp had been Norwegian. Maybe the Norwegian UN soldiers had their own post office with them. You have become very interested in the newspaper, said her mother drearily when Sophie returned to the kitchen. Luckily, her mother said no more about mailboxes and stuff, either during breakfast or later on that day. When she went shopping, Sophie took her letter about fate down to the den. She was surprised to see a little white envelope beside the cookie tin with the other letters from the philosopher. Sophie was quite sure she had not put it there. This envelope was also wet around the edges, and it had a couple of deep holes in it, just like the one she had received yesterday. Had the philosopher been here? Did he know about her secret hiding place? Why was the envelope wet? All these questions made her head spin. She opened the letter and read the note. Dear Sophie, I read your letter. I read your letter with great interest and not without some regret. I must unfortunately disappoint you with regard to the invitation. We shall meet one day, but it will probably be quite a while before I can come in person to Captain's Bend. I must add that from now on I will no longer be able to deliver the letters personally. It would be much too risky in the long run. In the future, letters will be delivered by my little messenger. On the other hand, they will be brought directly to the secret place in the garden. You may continue to contact me whenever you feel the need. When you do, put a pink envelope out with a cookie or a lamp of sugar in it. When the messenger finds it, he will bring it straight to me. Yes, it is not pleasant to decline a young lady's invitation to coffee, but sometimes it is a matter of necessity. P.P.S. If you should come across a red silk scarf anywhere, please take care of it. Sometimes personal property gets mixed up, especially at school and places like that, and this is a philosophy school. Yours, Alberto Knox. Sophie had lived for almost 15 years and had received quite a lot of letters in her young life, at least Christmas and on birthdays. But this letter was the strangest one she had ever received. It had no postage stamp. It hadn't even been put in the mailbox. It had been brought straight to Sophie's top secret hideout in the old hedge. The fact that it was wet in the dry spring weather was also most mystifying. The strangest thing of all was the silk scarf, of course. The philosopher must have another pupil. That was it. And this other pupil had lost a red silk scarf, right? But how had she managed to lose it under Sophie's bed? And Alberto Knox, what kind of a name was that? One thing was confirmed. The connection between the philosopher and Hilda Moller nagged, but that Hilda's own father was now confusing their addresses. That was completely incomprehensible. Sophie sat for a long time thinking about what connection there could possibly be between Hilda and herself. Finally, she gave up. The philosopher had written that she would meet him one day. Perhaps she would meet Hilda too. She turned the letter over. She now saw that there were some sentences written on the back as well. Is there such a thing as natural modesty? Wisest is she who knows she doesn't know. True insight comes from within. He who knows what is right will do right. So these are the statements that were in the letter. I'll read them again. Is there such a thing as natural modesty? Wisest is she who knows she does not know. True insight comes from within. He who knows what is right will do right. Sophie knew that the short sentences that came in the white envelopes were intended to prepare her for the next big envelope, which would arrive shortly thereafter. She suddenly had an idea. If the messenger came to the den to deliver a brown envelope, Sophie could simply sit and wait for him. Or was it a her? She would definitely hang on to whoever it was until he or she told her more about the philosopher. The letter said that the messenger was little. Could it be a child? Is there such a thing as natural modesty? Sophie knew that modesty was an old-fashioned word for shyness. For example, about being seen naked. But was it really natural to be embarrassed about that? If something was natural, she supposed, it was the same for everybody. In many parts of the world, it was completely natural to be naked. So, it must be society that decides what you can and can't do. When grandma was young, you certainly couldn't sunbathe topless. But today, most people think it is natural, even though it is still strictly forbidden in lots of countries. Was this philosophy? Sophie wondered. The next sentence was, wisest is she who knows she does not know. Wiser than who? If the philosopher meant that someone who realized that she didn't know everything under the sun was wiser than someone who knew just a little, but who thought she knew a whole lot, well, that wasn't so difficult to agree with. Sophie had never thought about it before, but the more she did, the more clearly she saw that knowing what you don't know is also a kind of knowledge. The stupidest thing she knew was for people to act like they knew all about things they knew absolutely nothing about. The next sentence was about true insight coming from within. But didn't all knowledge come into people's heads from the outside? On the other hand, Sophie could remember situations when her mother or the teachers at school had tried to teach her something that she hadn't been receptive to. And whenever she had really learned something, it was it was when she had some it was when she had somehow contributed to it herself. Now and then, even, she would suddenly understand a thing she had drawn a total blank on before. That was probably what people meant by insight. So far, so good. Sophie thought she had done reasonably well on the first three questions, but the next statement was so odd she couldn't help smiling. He who knows what is right will do right. Did that mean that when a bank robber when a bank robber robbed a bank, it was because he didn't know any better? Sophie didn't think so. On the contrary, she thought that both children and adults did stupid things that they probably regretted afterwards, precisely because they had done them against their better judgment. While she sat thinking, she heard something rustling in the dry undergrowth on the other side of the hedge, nearest to the woods. Could it be the messenger? Her heart started beating faster. It sounded like a panting animal was coming. The next moment, a big Labrador pushed pushed its way into the den. In its mouth, it held a big brown envelope which it dropped at Sophie's feet. It all happened so quickly that Sophie had no time to react. A second later, she was sitting with the big envelope in her hands, and the golden Labrador had scampered off into the woods again. Once it was all over, she reacted. She started to cry. She, she sat like that for a while, losing all sense of time. Then she looked up suddenly. So that was his famous messenger. Sophie breathed a sigh of relief. Of course, that was why the white envelopes were wet around the edges and had holes in them. Why hadn't she thought of it? Now it made sense to put a cookie or a lump of sugar in the envelope when she wrote to the philosopher. She may not always have been as smart as she would like, but who could have guessed that the messenger was a trained dog? It was a bit out of ordinary, to put it mildly. She could certainly forget all about forcing the messenger to reveal Alberto Knox's whereabouts. Sophie opened the big envelope and began to read. That's it.
All right, sir.
That ends
I
the
think,
chapter.
yeah, we'll stop with this uh,
Okay, sir.
for today's session in terms of reading. Would like to get some commentary, opinions, thoughts.
Yeah, sure, sir. Who will go first? I think
How
Daoji
she
should
is
go first.
listening, SK Garu can go.
Uh, Daoji would like to say that if I if my connection didn't lose 2 times, I will feel very good. But it always happens with me. Always,
Well,
man.
it's called
Two
fate,
time at least.
Daudi.
Very nice, very nice.
It's okay. You know,
App.
I think the subject is interesting enough that, even if you get cut a couple of times, it's still, yeah. So we are getting to that interesting stage where we are slowly moving from the natural philosophy to the Socratic method.
Yeah.
Right, sir.
Socrates is completely
Now,
different.
like this, yeah.
Hmm.
Hello.
Socrates is
Yeah,
the
yeah,
first philosopher na, in
Hmm.
Western thing.
correct. So
Yeah.
famously, the method of
So
deduction
now,
is called the Socratic method even till today, actually.
Socratic method,
Hmm.
and he has
yeah.
got another something called paradox also. I mean, these things are written by Plato, actually.
Yeah.
I know that I know nothing. It was this famous quote, it seems.
Mm. Now the real story begins.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, most of the readers will get into Sophie's character very instantly, sir,
Mm.
yeah,
because the
We all
mystery
are
and
Sophie.
the yeah, that's what I'm saying. The mystery and
Mm.
the anxiety, the curiosity that philosopher, the so-called philosopher, is maintaining is good at many levels. And the revelation of the little messenger was also
Mm.
quite interesting, sir. I
Hermes.
found it very
Yeah,
uh,
his name is Hermes.
okay, okay.
Yeah,
So
it's not
after
like that.
hmm,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, after looking at the little messenger, then she understand why the edges of the envelope were wet and why there were two holes all the time.
Yeah, I noticed that you smiled that time, huh?
Yeah,
See,
Mm.
that's the thing, right?
yeah,
When you keep wondering what is the mystery, but then the most
exactly,
simple of explanations, a lot of times actually gets you to the right answer, right?
right, sir,
So
exactly.
if you think it's a big mystery, you will think about all kinds of big things, but it's usually it's very simple.
Yes, yes,
Yeah,
Yeah, I guess that's what life is always like that. It always seems to throw you some big puzzle, but then in the end, it is because you think it's a big puzzle that it appears big. Think about something
mm,
small, and usually it fits.
yeah.
and
Not everything
That's why I
is like a
love Gardner's approach to this book, no?
yeah,
Or his
quite
approach
fascinating.
to philosophy itself.
Yeah, totally, totally, totally. You know, and
and one
not
more thing,
everything is
sir.
like a Sherlock Holmes
Yeah,
novel. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah. All this is okay, but uh, the way the writer put uh, content in the chapter called Fate about
Mm.
ancient cultures and ancient practices. Maybe that was too raw into that subject because without knowing the real, the true sense of what those subjects were, I think he had put it in. That's what I thought.
Yeah,
I didn't
Because,
understand what.
well, because so many people, without even knowing the science of astrology or any other sciences, uh,
Mm.
uh, I wouldn't say practice, but they claim to be astrologers or
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
the practitioners of that kind of sciences, and they behave like one, and you know, people. they imitate the true practitioners and gain cheap people to monetize.
Hmm.
Right. See, I mean, at the end of the day, it's very
Sir.
important to understand. If there is a market, there'll always be somebody who supplies to that market, right? Eventually,
Right, sir.
they'll do it, right?
Yeah.
So, um, if there is somebody ready to pay somebody else for
Hmm.
astrology or horoscope or whatever it is, you will
Hmm.
eventually see people who claim to be astrologers and who can predict future using horoscopes and things like that. Occam's razor.
Yeah.
Occam's razor is um, the simplest explanation is usually the correct one for naturally observed phenomena, right? Instead of some elaborate hoax or elaborate thing. So if you have seen this movie called Contact, Jodie Foster,
Yeah.
in
Yes,
that
sir.
in
I
the end
watched
there
it.
is this big discussion about Occam's razor, right? So
Oh.
she keeps dismissing people who come up with elaborate explanations, saying there's something called Occam's razor, right? But then in the end, something happens to her, and she gives this
Hmm.
what seems to be like a very fascinating story, and the other people will
Hmm.
now say, look, Occam's razor dictates that nothing actually happened to you. Your experience is, I mean, it's a story basically, right? Whereas for her, it's real. So
Hallucination.
not hallucination. It's more like, okay, you cooked up a story kind of thing. It's even worse than that,
Oh.
right? Yeah.
Hmm.
They'll
Right,
tell
sir.
her that your explanation doesn't fit what we saw, basically.
Right, sir. Right, sir.
Yeah. So basically, she's dismissed by most people. Yeah.
That's what,
So
sir. Because before saying some practice or some ancient culture or some ancient tradition or some ancient science, without practicing it, without truly practicing it, without truly absorbing the knowledge from that culture or tradition or science, they just what to say? They just ignore it or not ignore it, condemn it, or
yeah.
that's
See, the
what
bottom line
I
is this,
think.
right?
It's
So here is the
so.
deal. I do side with some of the people that dismiss these things because for most of the people in the
Mm,
world, it is truly irrelevant. Okay. Now,
okay.
if you are the questioning type and if you want to get deeper, then for you it's open, you know. But to take
Mm,
it and apply it to people who are not concerned about, these kinds of questions or they're focused elsewhere, right? Regular day-to-day life.
mm,
That is also not fair, in my opinion, because there are simple things in life that are not simple for a lot of people. So they are busy with that, right? So you
maybe,
cannot
sir.
force
Maybe.
them to think
Uh,
about complicated things, whereas they are
mm,
just trying to um, put a very basic life together, right?
yeah, I understand, sir. But maybe it does not apply to, or maybe it is not many people's concern to approach this science or believe in this that kind of science. But the science itself, condemning the science itself is
Yeah. See,
not right, I guess.
you can condemn the relevance of it. Is all I'm saying.
Relevance, condemnation of relevance is fine, but
Yeah.
not the science itself,
Right.
not the practice of
I
that.
mean, the way some people do it is by saying that these are useless, right? So that's when they
Mm,
say useless, they don't mean that it is wrong, or they just say that it's not relevant for most people. It's of
right,
no
sir, right,
use. Yeah.
right, sir.
Yeah.
Not very needful to the people.
Hey Vishwagaru, your
Yeah.
moon is not on the right place. Okay, and the
Exactly.
Saturn is
Exactly.
moving right to left.
See, Davji, of all people, you are the one that probably needs to pay attention to your horoscope, right? Because you're not married yet. All right. So for me, my stars are very clear. Every day, I know where they are going to move.
For me,
The reason
star
is we
doesn't
see stars every
matter.
day. No, it's not
Exactly.
like that. It doesn't
Exactly.
matter for you. We see stars every day during daylight. That's the
Exactly.
important thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So for us, there is no need to believe
Super, sir.
it's there. For you, you need to be careful.
I mean, rather than no need, it is no point.
Exactly. You can't do much. So anyway, yeah. See, look, bottom line is this: if you are not into this philosophical stuff, I am the last person to force anybody to think about it. Okay, you will not find me in that camp because look, at the end of the day, you can only feed somebody who's hungry, right? So
Mm.
there's a
Yeah.
reason why this guy keeps giving Sophie envelopes because she's interested in it,
Yeah.
right?
And one more thing, because
Mm.
Sophie's belly is full.
Yeah,
That's
totally.
just
That's what I'm
that
saying,
is
right? Yeah.
yeah.
So because
If
the
so,
belly
if
is
Sophie
full,
was a middle class working in a office, I don't think so. Anybody would give her the envelope for any
exactly,
topic about philosophy.
exactly. You know,
She will just reject it. She
yeah,
would just reject it.
yeah. Yeah, Jignasu are you saying agree. I have listened to a handful of Nobel laureates in science speak. Not a single sentence is longer than 3 to 4 words. Very simple, non-scientific language. Yeah, because if you understand something, it becomes simple, right? I mean, sometimes you can't simplify it, but at least you'll be able to explain it simply, you know, or at least you can say something is complicated or complex to understand, you know. So good,
Mm.
good discussion. Perhaps Mother Nature, irrespective of its is what is he saying? Perhaps Mother Nature, irrespective of its complexity and its grandeur, somehow conforms to simplicity. Or the way to think about it is the human brain is sophisticated enough for us to simplify it or to understand it simply. You know, that's one way of looking at it.
The,
But there's a
the
lot
more simple,
to, yeah,
the more simpler it, the more it is better, sir.
yeah. I mean, there, yeah. See, why do you try to understand nature? For predictability, for better survivability, all these kinds of things, right? Otherwise,
Mm.
you just wake up in the morning and then do whatever it takes to survive, right? But there's more in the
Mm.
human nature to try to um, look beyond the present, basically. In a way, it's a blessing as well as a curse. Blessing because it leads to safety measures and all those that will help you to reduce unpredictability. The
Mm.
curse is that you get nervous thinking about the future, whereas the future is not here yet, basically, right? Or thinking about the past where past is already gone. Yeah,
While you
complexity
are
is another thing. Yeah, yeah,
while you are saying it, I got a recent movie reference. I will
yeah.
just say Iron Man and Thanos. A
Huh,
little small conversation.
I see.
Thanos asks him, "So you are Tony Stark?" And Tony Stark says, "So you know me?" Then Thanos replies, "You are not the only one cursed with knowledge," he says.
uh,
When he said
interesting.
knowledge is bliss or knowledge is a curse, then this came to my mind. So,
Yeah, yeah. See, the Indian philosophers, for one, have always said knowledge is not the blessing, experience is, right? The difference between the
mm,
jnana and the vijnana, basically, because experience is the one that
yes,
puts an end to the quest for knowledge, basically.
right, sir.
You know, until then you are a
Right.
seeker. Once you experience, the thirst is over. Basically, at that point you are fully satisfied because of the first-hand experience.
Right, right, sir.
Yeah. So anyway, all right. Any
Good,
other?
good.
Yeah, go ahead, Raji.
Yeah, we are almost finished past 40 pages.
Yeah,
So the stage is set for the philosophical journey ahead. I'm
yeah,
looking forward to it. I'm sorry for the last session I was not able to join.
No, no. I hope you had a good. Everything went off smoothly wherever, whichever function you were attending.
Yeah, very smoothly, very smoothly. 7 drinks inside, and I was at very like 7 or 8 stages of fun.
All right.
Uh, so it was very good. Of marriage goes was very smooth. Looking forward for the next episode of this,
Yeah.
and I would like you to recite that Oedipus story. If you know that.
Absolutely. We'll start with that next session.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
But I love that
Yeah, yeah.
story. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. No problem. We'll take
All
care of
right,
it.
all right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. With that, to everybody who's watching as well as who's going to watch in the future, thank you very much. If you like the stream, please like the channel, share the stream, and as well as subscribe to the channel. We appreciate your participation and engagement. Thank you very much.